Human beings are animals that have the ability to develop their own intellectual capacity throughout the course of their lives by compiling experiences and finding patterns within said experiences. These patterns would result in an ability to guess or assume what the effect of an instigator or cause would be. We as individuals perceive the world in different ways, despite the fact that we technically receive the same data via our senses, and this is substantiated by the fact that we have separate ways of thinking and separate memories of the same exact event. This claim, of course, is based on the concept that there is a real world from which we gather information. The argument that there is no real world is backed by the principle that beyond senses there is nothing truly concrete that we can think about. All we think of is sensory experiences, and therefore there is no proof that there is a true or real world beyond our perception. However, in accordance with Descartes' meditations, I think therefore I am. The very action of having to impose an idea or perceived principle upon something, that something being an aspect of the real world, to determine whether or not the idea actually applies in a real world context, inherently serves as evidence that implies that there is a real world. For example, in mathematics, the application of trigonometry and Pythagoras' principle to acquire values that coincide with the height of a mountain, for instance, or the length of a tree that has fallen down, entails imposing an idea upon an object in which a pattern is perceived. However, how do we perceive? How do we gain our knowledge? The devices we use to employ, that we employ to acquire knowledge are called ways of knowing. They entail emotion, language, reason, sense, faith, imagination, and memory. However, as animals, besides knowledge gained through experience, human beings also have an innate knowledge, or instincts, that incline one to make judgments a certain way based on environmental stimulus. The proposed question is whether or not the devices we use to acquire knowledge serve as a system of vetting our instincts. And to that, I say, yes, ways of knowledge are a mechanism that can be employed to vet the reliability or the truth of what is innately perceived as proper given the situation. The aforementioned devices restrict instinct from being carried out to extreme extents. Furthermore, ways of knowing cannot eradicate instinct and vice versa. I would say that ways of knowing refine instinct. Intuition comes as a result. We must separate intuition from instinct, seeing as intuition, as opposed to instinct, is not something that you are inherently designed with or born with. The intuition is something that comes as a result of sensory experiences. It's a sense that you acquire based on what you've experienced. For instance, libido, one's biological sex drive, is limited by rational thought. You cannot just act upon your sexual drive. And this is your intuition telling you that to do so would result in consequences that would not benefit you. People do not just act upon their sex drives. Another example is the instinctual response to fear, to run, or to fight, or to not act at all. The inclination to behave like this cannot be taken away. Instinct is still there. We are still animals. The incentive remains, but let's say that you're afraid of taking an exam that is going to begin in the next 5 minutes. The fear would compel you to attempt to avoid it, or to remain where you are. But your intuition, seeing as you've been through this experience before, would tell you that taking the exam is the proper course of action, because doing so would be detrimental. Of course, there are many cases in which instinct remains predominant, and this is why we have so much crime, I suppose. Rapists, murderers, people that act upon their instincts, of course, exist, but biological inclinations differ amongst every human being, and experiences and ethical principles can be introduced differently, shaping intuition in separate ways. The effect of experience on human behavior cannot be simply confined to the parameters of instinct and ways of knowing. and to completely disregard rehabilitated patients and the purpose of psychiatric facilities, for instance, where they try to shape intuition, where they try to provide the experience of actually knowing what is right and what is wrong, is it demonstrates the disregard for evidence substantiating the claim that ways of knowing are a check on our instincts.